Okay, everybody. Well, let's get started. I'm Sophie O'Keefe and I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia. I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's Festival of Bright Ideas. Thanks a lot for coming. The Festival of Bright Ideas began in 2017 and it's a partnership between Pearson and English Australia whereby one ELICOS teacher is chosen from each state branch of Australia to present on a national level, normally at the English Australia Conference, but this year virtually at the Festival of Bright Ideas. And I'd just like to congratulate all of this year's Bright Ideas winners that you can see on the screen now. I'd also like to especially thank Pearson, who are our partner in bringing you the festival. And now to introduce our first speaker for today. Franca Turrin works at UTS InSearch and she's going to be presenting on putting the EQ into e-learning. Thanks, Franca.
All right. Okay, I would like to thank English Australia and Pearson's for this award. I'd also like to congratulate the other winners and thank Jackie and Rebecca at UTS for encouraging me to enter. So as I said, or as Sophie mentioned, this is all about putting the EQ in e-teaching. Welcome to my home. So come in. Then that's what we're doing after all. We're teaching from home essentially. So that means we're inviting people into our personal space. So whether we show our surroundings or we use a virtual background, by very nature of this act, we're sharing a little of ourselves with our students. So teaching from my space presents a particular conundrum. In my case, I have a wonderful dog, but he's a bit of a barker. But to my surprise, he's also my muse and gave me a wonderful solution to my problem. So this bright idea grew from my experience teaching online and wanting to create a real connection with my students, not only to motivate and activate engaged learning, but also to create a sense of belonging that was missing because of isolation and COVID-19. I have 3 activities that I presented as my bright idea: show and tell, traveling classroom, and what's on my desk. I'll go in depth and explain the activities, but first I thought we could look at the theory behind my madness. So over the years, I've seen how English for academic purposes can be daunting. Oh, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see a screen, we just can't see you.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So over the years, I've seen how English for academic purposes can be daunting for my students. So when COVID hit and we all had to go online, I could see that it was going to be even more problematic. I know what it's like learning a second language, having had personal experience, and I know how daunting and self-conscious you can feel. And I can also understand how my students feel. Now with learning online, students have the added anxiety of speaking to people they actually can't see. They can't pick up on those nuances, those visual cues. They can't read the classroom or read the room. And they're doing this all whilst they're in their pajamas with the dog barking in the background or their parents walking through the room. So I think because of this, it became even more important that I keep my students motivated and supported their learning. So I started to do some research. I learned about EQ, psychology, and self-determination theory as they apply in the teaching sphere to see if I could find some solutions. By nature, I favor a little silliness and a little lightheartedness in my teaching practice. So the challenge was to integrate the theory with my usual teaching style. So why is EQ important to e-teaching? Bottom line, it motivates students and empowers learning. There are 2 schools of thoughts that best sum up motivational theory. These are Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory. Maslow developed his motivational theory based on hierarchy of needs in the 40s. The theory is based on physiological needs like shelter, food, safety, and feeling loved being met before we can address motivational psychological needs like self-esteem and self-worth. Deci and Ryan built upon this motivational theory in the 70s and introduced the idea of nutriments. These were autonomy, competence, and relatedness in order to develop a person's motivation. With the implementation of these nutriments, they believed that we could take an amotivated person, so someone who's not engaged or not internally driven, and instill self-motivation and self-determination. So I think never before for this generation of students has COVID demonstrated how important and relevant these hierarchy of needs are. However, not in isolation, but rather by implementing Deci and Ryan's nutriments of self-development theory, we acknowledge the basic needs, and in tandem, we foster a sense of belonging in this online sphere. So the next few slides, we'll look at implementing those nutriments in my teaching. So let's have a look. So according to Deci and Ryan, there are 3 basic needs for good mental health and well-being. These are autonomy, competence, and relatedness in that order. How are these relevant to e-teaching? Of those 3, I believe relatedness is primary and the others will follow. English for academic purposes, students can lack motivation, be it shyness, apathy, unfamiliarity, and this can lead to an amotivated student. Blank screens, lack of engagement, no interaction. We've all been there. I think only by creating an environment of relatedness through personal connection can you encourage and support the student to be intrinsically motivated and autonomous. So with this method, the amotivated student feels a sense of belonging, and in tandem with the tools of competence, the student is able to develop an autonomous practice. So relatedness. What is relatedness? I believe that by allowing students to see who we are, by sharing of ourselves and establishing a strong connection, the more we get to know them, the more they're going to open up. They're going to trust us. For me, creating that sense of belonging and personal connection is the underpinning of my teaching. Although it can be time consuming, especially when you have a timetable and you've got lots to do, if you take the time in the beginning or a little bit each day by creating this safe space, the motivational benefits and the engagement that you gain from winning the student's confidence has such long-term benefits, both for their learning practice and also just as human beings needing that belonging. So I employed this strategy over 4 EAP classes over the last 8 months. I seem to have had a positive response from my students. So how did I go about creating this relatedness? Let's have a look. So what does competence look like? Well, in regards to the relatedness, how I created that, if I just go back a slide, essentially what I did was, if we look at the right-hand side of the screen, I had games like show and tell, and the bottom one is an example of a student showing their show and tell. I also have things like 3 truths and a lie. I guess in essence, they're about disarming. They're about sharing a little bit of ourselves and giving students the opportunity to share. Okay, competence. So what does competence look like? Well, you're never too old for people to praise, acknowledge, and recognize you for what you achieve. We all like to feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment, not only internally, but also recognition externally. On the screen, you can see some ways I go about achieving this in my classroom. I will go in depth in subsequent slides, but in essence, they involve taking the time to explain, be it the functions like the annotate feature in Ringcentral or how to use your phone in Ringcentral. It's also about giving praise and encouraging students, encouraging them to show their things on screen, to show OneDrive docs together. Another thing that I think is really important is repetition. And I think it's very important to create predictable instructions. I'll use the same icons, the same slides to my students so they know what's coming up next. They know what to expect. And I give my students something familiar and relatable. Okay. Autonomy. What is an autonomous student and how can I help our students become autonomous? An autonomous student feels they have control over their learning. They have the freedom of choice and the willingness to engage. I think by giving students the autonomy to turn on or off their screen, invariably when they feel comfortable enough, they will turn it on. In the meantime, I've given my students the choice and the skills to annotate on screen, to write in the chat, place an avatar as a video profile, so they can actively participate in their classroom. And as time passes, I see the screens come on, or maybe they don't, but the majority do turn on. So also in structure, autonomy can be found. On the screen, there are examples of this structured autonomy. These are explaining why they're doing an activity and why it's relevant to their learning, using breakout rooms and allowing them to direct the discussion in those rooms, giving them the autonomy to annotate in class. And the other two things that you can see on the screen at the bottom are a newsletter and check. So I'll just go in further and explain the newsletter and check. They don't appear in this PowerPoint, but you can go to the website and have a look at a little bit more information about them. So these last two strategies are not in this PowerPoint, but I investigated a little further just to sort of explain how I allow the students to have that autonomy. So the idea behind the newsletter was to keep students abreast in these changing times and also give them control over their learning. So with the class newsletter, they're able to see what's been completed in class, what's to come, and other class newsletter and other class news. With check is a color correction key based on UTS's correction key that I developed for students in order to enhance feedback on written assignments in a blended learning environment. And the idea behind it essentially is to promote autonomous correction. Okay, so now let's move on to the bright idea activities. So show and tell, L is for Louis. This is the idea that launched it all. So how does it work? Essentially, I introduce the activities to my students, I model it, and then I get them to give me feedback and to show me. So what I did just recently is with my new class, my current class, I recorded myself doing it, and I'll play that for you now. Oh. Oh. I'll stop sharing and then I'll share again and see if that helps. All right, maybe we'll just pass on from here. No, I'll just stop it and we'll move on to the next one.
Had you allowed the audio, Franca?
There. I'll just move on because it just seems quite jagged.
Okay.
Okay, so essentially what I was doing there, I introduced the activity to my students and I showed them, I said, I'm going to start with the letter L and I would like you to, and then I introduced Louis and I said, this is Louis, he's a very good dog, we go running. And then basically I'm just introducing him, but the whole method behind this was Louis is a little bit of a barker. And it was a good way at the beginning of the class or the beginning of the term to introduce him so the students were aware of my surroundings, but also because then it allowed me to get them seeing something personal about me. So having that relatedness in the conversation. So once I'd shown him, I then basically put it over to my students and said, okay, now it's your turn. Can you show me something starting with the letter L? And so they were given the night to go away and think about it, and then they would come back. So that evening, I received this WeChat from one of my students, and he was concerned about, oh, okay, what can I use for the letter L? What can I show? But I guess what this actually is showing that, I guess it's that relatedness. He felt a connection and he was choosing to be engaged. So I think the show and tell and allowing Louis to do that and allowing the students to participate is a good way to create that relatedness in the classroom. So the next one that I'd like to show is the traveling classroom. So that with the traveling classroom, and the next two activities basically show the tools of competentness in the related context. So with these ones, a lot of the students haven't been to campus. So this Google Earth activity in a small way helps them experience the college. I then go on to use it in subsequent lessons whereby the students and I would share our favorite locations, best coffee shops, camping sites, primary schools. So with this activity, the students take on the role of guide, and they're given the choice to present about something that they genuinely like and are interested in. And because it's something familiar or engaging, they willingly build up their communication skills. So I do have another video with this. It is a smaller video, so we'll give it a go. And if it works, great. If not, we'll just move on to the next slide.
Have you shared the sound, Franca? Did you click the share your computer
the
sound?
URL that I'll put in the chat. Can you hear it? So
yes.
In this case, you'll see that we type in Google Earth. So once you've typed that in, it will take you to a page that looks like this. So for the example, I've typed in UTS here. All right, so we use the search field. We've typed in UTS. Now, I've already launched this, so we can go in and have a look at it. So here's UTS. It's very close to Central Railway Station, just here, and it's the building that is surrounded by the yellow line. So if we go in a little closer, we can have a look at the building. So let's go down. Okay, so we're going to Street View, and in Street View, you can see the front of the building. So you would have had most of your classes in these rooms up here this year. On level 4, you'll find the staff, the academic staff room where you can speak to your teachers if you need to. And also there's reception. Downstairs you have the student lounge and the student centre, but not far from here also is UTS library. So let's go and have a look. It's a short walk, so we just follow the yellow line, and the yellow line will take us to UTS library. So on the way to the library, you probably would pass this really interesting building, and it's called the Dr. Chowchuk Wing Building. It's the UTS School of Business, and let's go down for a bit of a closer look. So if we go down into Street View, we can see the front of the building. Now this building was designed by Franca, and it won a lot of awards. It's a really interesting building. It's called the Brown Paper Bag Building. You can kind of see why. All right. So from here, this is on the goods lines. From here, it's a short walk across to UTS Library, just here. So if we go down and have a look at UTS Library from the street, you can see it's a nice open building, lots of glass, lots of light, excellent resources. So it's really brand new, quite a very interesting building. And across the road is Central Plaza, lots of shops and some really good food. So now it's your turn. So what I'd like you to do is, let me just go in here. In the Ringcentral chat, I've put the URL. I want you to copy that URL, put it into your Google web browser, and then you'll bring up this page here. In here, where it's in the search function, I would like you to type your first primary school, the name of your first primary school. And then I want you to get ready to share it on Ringcentral. All right, let's go exploring. All right, so this slide is basically the slide that I introduced in the class. And so this is for the first time, and they'll have this, and then the subsequent slide is for other activities. So this one is where I've got them to type in their primary school and the location. And here are some students' examples. This was one of my students showing me her primary school. And then I had two other students. One was showing me a high school they went to in Australia, actually. And the other one was showing me the high school in China. So it allows them to have something familiar and talk about something that is familiar to them. And as I said, you can use it for subsequent activities. And some of them can be like, share your favorite camping place, or share your favorite gallery, or anything. I mean, the ideas are endless, that they can go in and investigate, and we can see further into it. So then the next one that I have is what's on my desk. So essentially with what's on my desk, what makes it an effective activity? So this activity makes the online world a little more real. It nourishes that relatedness in our community that I want to foster in my classroom. It also gives students the tools and the competence in using the software, hardware, in order to participate in this community on an ongoing and engaging basis. So again, I've got the video that I introduced my students to this concept, and we'll watch this. It should be okay. It's another small one. Okay, so the next activity is called What's on My Desk? And the idea of this activity is that we get to share the space that we're coming from. We get to know a little bit about each other, and you get to see the madness that is my desk, and I get to see the madness that is your desk. And maybe we can ask each other a few questions. Maybe you can tell us something that's special to you. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make sure that our phone and our computer are on the same Wi-Fi settings, okay? So it doesn't matter which phone you use. You can use an iPhone or you can use an Android. It will work with both in Ringcentral, so don't worry about that. So to do that, let me just flick across here so you can see that my phone Wi-Fi is set the same as my computer Wi-Fi. Okay, so we're good to go. We know that's all good. Okay, excellent. So now we go across, and in Ringcentral, if I bring Ringcentral across so you can see, I go share. You can see that it's brought up my iPhone. Now, if you are on an Android, you would either click screen or whiteboard. So either one would work. So here I am on an iPhone. I go share. There we go. So it's saying, are you on the same network? Yes, I'm on the same network. Absolutely. Okay, and then the next thing it's going to say is, now what I need to do, so I'm on the same network. If I flick my screen up, I can bring on screen mirroring. So you can see that. Yep, there you go, screen mirroring. I click on that, okay, and it brings up Ringcentral. So by clicking on that, it then brings the screen up onto Ringcentral, and by using my camera, I can now share my desk with you. So if I flick this one, you can see how I'm going about doing it. Okay, so here you go. You can see my desk, my computer. I've got my ATM, which allows me to switch between my iPad, my webcam, and my camera that's filming this. Okay, I'll just flick this off so we get a better view. There are my materials for the lesson today. Okay, picture of my papa and the cards. These are Italian playing cards, and I used to play this with my papa all the time. There are my hard drives where I keep my course materials on. I've got my wolves for good luck, and then my crazy children. I've got a card for my camera. Crazy bobblehead, okay. But the best thing when I'm teaching is I have my Wacom tablet. So this Wacom tablet allows me to draw, and I'll just flick back, okay. So it allows me to draw on the screen, much easier than using a mouse. All right, so, and if I want to stop sharing, I'll just bring across the panel here so you can see. I just go stop sharing. And there we go. So now it's your turn. So I'd like one by one each person to share their screen, okay? So we can have a little sticky beak. Okay, let's go.
Oh, Franca, this is Sophie here. I think we've just lost your sound when you're speaking. The mic. No, we can't hear you. Oh. I'll let you know when we can hear you if you just keep speaking. Yep, got you back.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not quite sure why the sound's not working, but we'll just keep going.
Absolutely.
All right, so as I said, with Google Pixel, these are the slides that I show my students, okay? They're with iPhone, and essentially this is Google Pixel and Samsung Galaxy. A little more complicated. You have to have a reflector, so this app called Reflector, so you can cast. But this gives you an example of some of my students' work. And essentially you can see there are kittens on laps to lunches on desks. The top right one was actually quite an interesting one. That student had some beautiful calligraphy work, which she then after class shared with us on a WeChat, and we all got to admire. And I think something that just happened this week was this particular WeChat that I had from a student. I sent her all the instructions. So we had done it in class, I'd introduced it, and then I'd sent her all the instructions, and she'd worked out how to do it. And she was like, oh, I can't wait to use it. And I think this is really rewarding to see this sort of accomplishment, this sense of accomplishment my student felt, you know. And it's all about giving that motivation that I think it inspired. So let's go into the last bit. What's the take home from all of this? Well, in essence, the three activities meet the psychological needs of the student and fulfill Deci and Ryan's nutriments to develop an intrinsically motivated student. So in regards to relatedness, I've created a safe community with a strong personal connection. I've got my students storytelling. Competence, I've built confidence in their ability and their tools. They can speak confidently about something that's familiar to them. They get to understand the software and hardware, so it's less daunting, especially with EAP students where they're going to take exams online. So it's getting them familiar with everything and feeling confident. Autonomy. So I've given them the freedom to choose. I've given them the freedom to be active, and I feel that by creating this sense of autonomy that I've empowered them in some way. So I've now used this theory and activities in 4 English for academic purpose classes online. I've watched my students go from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And I felt by applying the theory to my teaching, I've had engaged students, have high attendance, good participation, they're motivated. And I hope that I've motivated them in their learning journey and hopefully improved all our well-being during this time online. So thank you for listening. I don't know how I'm going for time, Sophie. How's the time?
Yeah, I think we've got time for the one question that's already come through. And if anyone else has any questions, perhaps you can pop them in the chat, and Franca, you can answer them in the chat as well. Kay just wanted to know in the What's on My Desk activity, what if they couldn't move their device?
So and that's where you use so they have the computer and they're actually just sharing their phone via Wi-Fi. So it's a second device. So what they're sharing is a second device. So the idea is that they share either their phone or their iPad as that second device.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing all of those creative ideas. I absolutely agree that rapport is everything with students, and all of those ideas are just so innovative in terms of ways to create a safe space and community with students. So thanks, Franca.
Thank you.